The dust rose like ghosts from the parched earth as Maria Quinn trudged down the winding path into the valley. Her boots crunched dry grass with every step, and the once clear creek beside her lay cracked and bone-dry. The sun beat down mercilessly, turning the landscape into a pale, brittle memory of the place she'd once called home. The townspeople of Dry Willow watched her return in weary silence. Some crossed themselves. Others turned away. She saw them, felt their eyes pierce her skin like tiny arrows, but Maria kept her back straight and her head high. It had been 10 years since she'd fled Dry Willow, after her mother died and the whispers began. They said she was cursed, that her prayers brought storms that ruined crops, and winds that toppled barns. Nonsense, of course, but in a town that relied on prayer as much as plow, even a hint of fear grew into gospel. Maria hadn't come back to prove anything. She hadn't come back to stir trouble. She came because her father was dying, and the letter he sent was the first time he'd used her name since the day she left. Come home, Maria. The land is dying. I am not far behind. The farmhouse stood crooked now, with peeling paint and a half-collapsed porch. But it was still home. Inside, the air smelled of cedar and liniment. Her father, Thomas Quinn, lay in bed beneath a sun-faded quilt, his once strong frame withered like the fields. Maria, he rasped, eyes wet with something more than age. You came? Of course I did, she said, brushing his white hair from his forehead. He reached for her hand. They won't listen. The town. They still believe you bring misfortune. But this valley needs you, I think. I think you were always meant for more. That night, she stood on the porch, watching lightning far in the distance. No rain, just dry sparks leaping across the sky. The valley's crops were nearly gone. Dust-choked cornstalks and brittle wheat. Livestock dying, wells running dry. She closed her eyes and whispered. Not a spell, not a chant, just a prayer. Not to God, not to angels, but to the land, to the wind, to the old rhythm of the earth she used to feel when her bare feet sank into warm soil and her fingers brushed green shoots. Let them see. Let them believe again, not in me, but in something bigger. Behind her, a floorboard creaked. Sheriff Will Harrow stood there, hat in hand. You're not welcome here, Maria. She turned slowly. The land doesn't care what they think of me. It only cares what it needs. His jaw tightened. If anything happens, more livestock dead, another well gone dry, they'll blame you. Maria looked past him to the stars. Then let them. The next day dawned hot and still. Maria walked through town with a basket on her arm, ignoring the stares. At the apothecary, old Mrs. Goodwin refused to sell her tonic. I don't deal with witches, she hissed. At the well, children were pulled away from her shadow. Even Pastor Jonas, who had baptized her as a baby, turned his back. She found solace only in the land. Her fingers traced the dying soil, lips whispering thank you and I'm sorry. Words like seeds, planted in silence. That evening, her father worsened. He gripped her wrist with a surprising strength. The old tree, he gasped. Where you used to play. Dig there. It took her 2 hours, and the moon was high when her spade hit metal. A small tin box, rusted with age. Inside was a folded letter, yellowed with time. Maria, your mother was like you. She heard the land, felt it breathe. When the elders couldn't bring rain, she could. They feared her too. They called it a curse. But it was a gift. Yours too. Don't hide it. Let them call you names. But don't stop listening. Love. Papa tears wet the note as Maria pressed it to her chest. She rose and walked to the center of the valley, to the stone outcrop where her mother used to sit. Kneeling, she laid her hands flat on the ground and prayed. The air shifted. Not a storm. Not yet. But something moved. A sigh in the wind. A creak in the sky. The next morning, a fire broke out on the eastern ridge. Dry lightning had struck a dead tree, and flames leapt across the hillside. Panic tore through Dry Willow as men raced to form a bucket line. But the fire was too fast. Maria ran to the ridge. Smoke stung her eyes. She dropped to her knees. Help me, she whispered to the land. Not for me, for them. Something shifted again. Clouds gathered, and rain fell. Not a drizzle, a storm. Thunder cracked, and cold sheets of water poured over the valley, dousing flames, soaking ash. The fire died as quickly as it had come. The town stood in stunned silence. But it wasn't thanks they offered. It was fear. She brought the fire, someone whispered. She controls the sky. She's unnatural. Maria turned to leave, soaked to the bone, tears lost in rain. Sheriff Harrow stopped her. You saved their land. Why walk away? Because they only see the storm, not the hands that calmed it. He nodded slowly. But I see you. And that matters too. The valley slept under cloud-strewn skies for 3 days. Then, on the 4th morning, the sun broke through and the scent of wet earth filled every corner of dry willow. Children danced in puddles. Farmers walked among green shoots, blinking in disbelief. Wells refilled. Rivers trickled again. But Maria stayed hidden. Her father had passed in the night. Peacefully. At his burial, only Sheriff Harrow stood by her side. You know, he said softly, they still talk. But some of them wonder now. Maria didn't answer. 2 weeks later, a woman came to her door. Mrs. Goodwin. She held out a pouch of herbs. For your grief, she said. And for the rain. Thank you. Others followed. Small gifts. Quiet apologies. No parades. But change. Slow and soft. One child even asked her to teach him to listen to the ground. Maria smiled. Not cursed. Not feared. Heard.